Welcome to another episode of the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and partnered with Vertical Valor magazine. On today's episode, John Gray and I are thrilled to welcome Dave Ellis. Dave is a pivotal figure in the development of the Spokane County Sheriff's Aviation program. Dave takes us through the journey of building the program from the ground up, sharing insights into the political and financial challenges, the role of data tracking, and the power of community engagement. He opens up about his background and his diverse career. We will discuss law enforcement to coaching, including his recent incredible success coaching a high school soccer team to a championship. We dive into the vital role of communication and education in ensuring the aviation program's growth and sustainability. The conversation also explores how the youth sports teach life lessons, the unique perspective of referees, and the challenges of law enforcement in Spokane County. You'll also hear about the evolution of Spokane County's aviation unit, including decisions about aircraft selection, advancements in aviation technology, and how real-time situational awareness is enhancing public safety. Dave shares his insights on UAS technology, drone integration, and the growing role of AI in emergency response. Throughout the episode, we touch on Dave's journey towards agency accreditation, innovations in training, his roles with APSA, and his involvement in shaping active shooter response curricula. We truly appreciate our followers. If you're enjoying the Hangar Z, please help us spread the word, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Thank you to our sponsors, Summit Aviation, Shotover, and Canyon Aero Connect.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Schonely.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
They're advising code 4 on the stop.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and partnered with Vertical Valor magazine. I'm Jack Schonely, your host today. Joining me today is John Gray, the creator of the Hangar Z podcast. John, hello and welcome.
Good morning, Commander. Have not blown away yet. I'm still here and power's still on. So
power's on. Wind has not blown his house down. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. We're glad that glad you were able to join us today, even though it was touch and go for the past week.
Yeah.
Hang in there. We've been talking about this guest for quite a while. He's been on our radar for at least a year. And we finally were able to talk to Dave and get him lined up, and here we are. So today we have a great guest in that one of the things that he's done in his career, among many things, is he was part of the beginning of an air unit. I mean, from the opening minute until where it is today. And when you hear how far they've come in the amount of time, our listeners are going to be amazed. I mean, this unit has come a long, long way in a short time, and they've done it smart. They've done it with safety in mind. They've done it with mission profiles in mind, what their mission priorities are. And Dave's been a big part of this. So this conversation is going to be very interesting for our listeners and the people that watch us. And our guest comes from Spokane County, Washington, Dave Ellis. Dave Ellis is with us. Hi, Dave.
Howdy.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've been a long time admirer of this program you guys do. You guys do some really good work. And I know I personally, from a user level, just love watching all the interactions and seeing all those people that, have been legends in this industry. And I really appreciate you guys, everything you guys do to kind of closer tie in this network, this community.
Thanks, Dave. Your check's in the mail.
Yeah. Good job, Dave. You read that perfectly, Dave. I mean, that teleprompter worked really nicely.
Couldn't even tell you reading straight.
That's it. Thanks for joining us. No, Dave, thank you very much for those words. And I know you mean them. And so we appreciate that. We appreciate the support, but we appreciate you being a guest too, because without people being willing to take a couple hours of their time to share their stories, there is no podcast. People would get tired of me and John in about 20 minutes and say, well, that was nice. We learned about the wind and Jack's new dog and, so thanks, Dave, for joining us.
It sounds like all of our phone conversations we have, Jack.
It does. It does.
I'll tell you, I'm excited for today's conversation. One, to learn more about you, Dave, but two, it seems like there's been a resurgence in agencies that are starting new aviation programs.
Yeah.
I think you're seeing that for a lot of reasons, but there's been a lot of publication, the positive results that law enforcement has received as a result of aviation programs becoming so prolific and kind of an essential part of what we do. So I think your story of how you guys built this program, the successes and some of the failures you've had will help some of these agencies that have maybe recently started their program or still in the planning phases of developing their program. And then those that, of course, already have programs will benefit as well. So I think this is a very timely conversation and just excited for all the knowledge you're about to impart on us. So thank you again.
Absolutely. My pleasure and looking forward to it.
It's been quite a ride, huh, Dave?
It has. It's, I've been very fortunate in my career to be able to do a lot of different assignments and work in a lot of different places. And aviation has been one of the biggest highlights for me. And I consider myself super lucky that, I was able to be, as you mentioned, in kind of the ground floor of starting a new helicopter program and being able to see it mature and grow to where it is these days.
And just before we get into the background of what led up to all that, let's share with our listeners, what year did that start where it went off the ground?
So the program officially started in 2005, and it actually got to go a little bit further back behind that because we did, Spokane County actually had an aviation program back in the 90s as well. In the early 90s, and it was in existence for, I think 5-6 years, flying some old Schweitzers and that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, I think it wasn't funded very well. I don't think it was meant for, the infrastructure wasn't there for it to be a sustainable program, probably. Yeah. And I don't think that the resources were thrown at it to make sure that it maintains as a safe and effective program. I think, and I've talked to those guys. They all kind of retired before I came on, but talked to them and kind of picked their brains to find out what was the first air support program in Spokane County like. And I think those guys put in a lot of work. I think it was no reflection of anything they did. I think they scraped and did everything they could to make it happen.
Yeah.
Just didn't have the platforms, and they ended up with one going into a river up here in Spokane County. But that kind of ended up being the end of the program back in, I think, 1992.
Oh boy. Yeah, that'll do it.
And that did it. Yeah. And so, when we came in, we started the program in 2005. And we were really lucky that when we started it from ground zero, that we had a network of retired Los Angeles PD pilots that live in this area. They'd retired up here, and we were able to really lean on them for expertise, and we weren't having to reinvent the wheel ourselves. And so, we were fortunate that we had some great guys who were pretty knowledgeable and pretty almost legends down there, between John Preston and Warner Krempels and Jim Kilgore and Jim Olmar, who all came in and were our first pilots, and helped us develop our policies and our procedures and helped us with the aircraft acquisition, the refurbishment process, TFO selection, all that kind of stuff, which, it's a daunting process just to do that. But if you don't have the expertise that they were giving us, boy, we would have been probably set up for failure. And so I'm extremely thankful, especially to John Preston, who kind of served as the manager or the unit manager and coordinator for all this when we first started. And so we in 2005, we started with our first aircraft, and that was just a simple OH-58. We received some federal funding that allowed us to go through and send it down to Aero Falcon down in California, had it completely refurbed, completely stripped down to nothing and redone. So we knew it was being done right, that we were going to have a safe aircraft that was completely fresh and all that kind of stuff. It was done right. A lot of credit to John Preston for putting us on that path and demanding that. And so, we acquired in 2005, went through about a year refurb process on it, took possession of, I think, in early 2006, and then started our missions. And, it was a fully equipped aircraft, and, FLIR, and it had, the SX-16 and, all the other stuff you expect out of it. We even had, and this is back in 2006, right? I had video downlinking as well. So, something that a lot of agencies back then didn't have access to. So that was really helpful for us to be able to use that.
We're going to get into these steps even more detail in a little bit. Yep. But I do want to ask you this. In 2006, did you have any idea, I mean, even in your wildest dreams, that it would be where it's at today?
No.
With the equipment you have, the personnel, the support, everything. Any idea would get to this point?
No, especially back then, it was survival mode. And we had some political climate that we had to work through. We're the only helicopter agency, in the entire region until you get to Seattle area, and there's none really in Idaho, that kind of stuff. So it's not like a lot of communities where there's police helicopters all over the place. This is kind of a big deal when it happened. And so we had to work through a lot of the political issues that come with starting a new helicopter program. Yeah. And then budgetarily, when we started in 06, and then leading into the downturn in the economy in 7 and 8 and 9 and that kind of stuff, those were tough times. And we had to really be creative and really work to highlight the successes of the program to keep it sustainable and show the value in the program and why we do this. But the first 3-4 years, were tough. And, you're building all your training and your institutional knowledge and that kind of stuff. It took a while. And so, those first 3-4 years, it wasn't really looking a whole lot to the future. It was like, how are we going to be open tomorrow kind of thing.
Yeah. But you had patience, determination. And like you said, you had some people that had been there, done that, supporting you. And so you didn't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, those four gentlemen you're talking about are all quality people that had different experience levels. When I say levels, they had experience in different things high flight time. A chief pilot was among them, Omar, Kilgore and Krempels, incredible pilots. And this Preston guy you're talking about, is this the same Preston that recently was awarded a Medal of Valor from LAPD that occurred in, I think it was 1973 on probation?
Wow.
This is true. This is a true story. He really did just receive the Medal of Valor, where it was overlooked for all these years. And it came out in an investigation, and they said, wow, these two guys should be getting Medal of Valor. And last year, John Preston received the Medal of Valor for a shootout where he was hit by gunfire. That's the same John Preston we're talking about, right, Dave?
It's the same one. And I'm glad that some of the stories in the past came out and they're positive. So that's good.
Yes, that's right.
If you know John, he's a character. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet in the entire world. And he is a guy that, 20 years later, I still go to lunch and still pick his brain and be like, hey, we got this going on. What do you think? How do you handle that kind of stuff? And he has always been, someone I could bounce ideas off of, and I consider him a great friend. So we're very lucky and entertained by him.
Oh, entertained is putting it mildly, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's a great man, and we both feel the same about him, and we love to kid him every chance we get. But at the same time, we appreciate him. So enough about Preston. Let's come back to to Dave, and let's go back in time, Dave, and walk us through this.
Real quick, Jack, I want to stay here for one more second because you brought up something. You actually brought up 2 points that I want to touch on. We've had Terry Mauchi, which I know both of you guys know very well. He's one of my favorite guys in the industry. And in the past, we've had conversations about new unit startups. And the two things that he always talks about as obstacles are the political climate and the funding that goes hand in hand with a new unit startup. And I know every agency and every locale is different as far as what obstacles they face politically. But is there any advice that you can give based on your experience to folks on either one of those obstacles, whether it's political or financial, and how they might employ some of the same things that you found successful?
I think on the political side, yeah, that's a great question. On the political side, I think that the more information, the better. And you really got to be kind of a salesman to get that word out there. You cannot rely on just doing good work and expecting people to know. And it feels a little weird to have to do that, but you have to be reaching out and understanding the information they want, what kind of metrics for success are you as your elected officials going to be looking for, and can we track that, and can we make sure that we can get that information to them? And it's not a one-time process, right? It's something that continuously is ongoing, because you have continuously new county commissioners come in, new city councilmen coming in, who might not know anything about the program, might not even know that you have a helicopter program. And so it's not something that you can say, okay, I checked that off the box, I'm done, and we educated, we're done. It's something that yearly you've got to be doing. And one of the biggest things we do is, and I know LAPD did this too, is bring them out to the hangar, and show them around, and for them to actually be able to put hands on it means so much more than sending an annual report, and making sure that they can actually have the opportunity to ask questions and actually, to actually touch it and see it is invaluable. And so, we frequently try and do that. We have a public website even where we go through and list almost every single call we go to, just number one, for transparency purposes, but two, to also highlight the good work that the unit is doing. When they look up and they see a helicopter in their neighborhood, now they can go and they go, oh, shoot, they're looking for a missing 4-year-old. That's a big deal. That's important work. I'm glad they're up there doing that kind of stuff. Where, hey, there was a, murder on the run. That's what they're looking for. And then they go, okay, they're not just burning holes in the sky. They're doing some important stuff here. So politically, I think that's huge. On the budget side, we, like I mentioned, we went through, the economic downturn at the beginning of our unit. Which is not ideal when they're looking to lay off officers and looking to cut wherever they can. We had to be really creative on how we do stuff. We were fortunate that some of our pilot cadre back then were civilians, and that really saved us a lot of money. And we had a lot of community support through in the region and everything that would help us out with grants or just offsetting some of the costs. One of our guys who's been with us for 20 years is Jack Scanlon, and he owns River City Helicopters. Phenomenal guy. I'll give you the shirt off his back. And I remember we had some serious fires right around probably 2007, again, in the very infancy of the program. And we're looking for wins and successes. And of course, like it seems to always happen, we were down for annual, right? And, very expensive proposition for us back then. And Jack said, hey, bring your helicopter over to River City Helicopters, and we'll take care of it for you. And we flew over there, and he told his staff, hey, stop working on my helicopters, get the sheriff's helicopter taken care of, and didn't charge us a penny, and allowed us to get into the fight and get some successes and some wins. And all those things matter. And when the elected officials see those major disasters, as you guys are seeing down in California, to be able to have an impact and be able to help, that's really comes into play. And so we were fortunate to have that network of people that really kind of helped us out as we were getting our feet underneath us, and allowed us to now grow and expand to where we are today now.
When it comes to the financial side of things, once your program's up and going, one of the stats that I love, and I know both you guys keep track of this, is hours saved. When you're in an open area search, and we can use our camera system, our infrared systems to scan and search for a missing person, for example, a couple acres in just a matter of minutes. Whereas if you had personnel on the ground on foot searching over the area, think about how long it would take. And then translating that into dollars saved, the bean counters love seeing stuff like that. I think it highlights our abilities so well. Any insight on how you guys keep track of that and how you might have used that to help leverage yourself in those situations?
Thank you to our sponsor, Canyon Aero Connect. Canyon Aero Connect has been a trusted leader in airborne law enforcement communication since Paul Wolfsburg introduced the first flight phone in 1970. While our name has evolved, our commitment to innovation and quality remains strong. Contact us today at canyonaeroconnect.com to explore our latest mission-critical solutions.
Yeah, so we track every call for service. We track it down by jurisdiction, type of call. We track if we were the first one on scene. We track if we were able to handle the call entirely by ourselves. Being able to free up a patrol officer from going. Spokane County is a huge county, and so there's a lot of times we can be the first one on scene and we can handle that call and clear it out and save. It is not uncommon for a deputy in the outer reaches to have to drive 30 minutes to get to his call. And so if we can get there quick and determine, hey, this call is done, that everyone's gone, it's party separate, whatever it may be, or resolve it ourselves, that's freeing up, potentially half an hour for the officer to drive there and half an hour from the drive back, which is huge. We track a lot of that stuff. We track number of arrests, a lot of other data that we put together in our annual reports, and we share that, with the community and with our elected officials to make sure they've got the best information they can to determine, how the agency is funded.
Jack, for you guys at LAPD, did you guys do anything different when it came to kind of, let's say, proving the worth, but actively showing how you reduce personnel costs on the ground?
Yes, and it trickled down through the four gentlemen Dave talked about earlier to Dave. I mean, a lot of the same stuff. Very careful statistics so that when the time comes where you got to defend yourself, you can do that. You have the data to show your value. And we talked about this at length, John, with on the audit episodes with Mike Daly about how could it be better. If there was one thing that came out of that auditor's report, and there was really only one thing out of that auditor's report in LA that was accurate, was that the data keeping should improve. And everyone at LAPD Air Support agrees with that. They've been asking for that. And the bean counter said no. So the one thing that he was recommending was something that was already being asked for. You can't collect enough data. You just can't. The more you have, the more you can defend yourself. That's simple. And the more you can fight for that next aircraft explain why it does cost a lot to maintain those aircraft. You can explain it better when you can show them what you've done. And I know that Spokane has done that from the beginning, and that's one of the reasons that they were successful. I will say, John, that it was a great question. And one of the things I thought about when Dave was describing what they did early on and what they continue to do, one of the people I thought about was your sergeant, Eric Widener. He was gifted at that. Really. I mean, you've talked about it before. Eric was really, really good at that, at keeping the air unit in view and saying, hey, look what we're doing. And with everyone in Ontario, that's accurate, right?
Yeah. And one thing, Dave, you said that's 100% true is once you're approved and your program's off the ground, now it's actually time to work. The job of getting the program approved, that's a lot of work. But now, the rubber hits the road, and you've really got to have some plans in place to make sure that you're conveying all the things you said. Again, going back to Eric, he was really good politically at making sure the relationships downtown were solid. And again, I understand politically everything's different, based from city to city and county to county and state to state. But I think for you guys, when I think about, one relationship, maybe one key relationship that was vital to the success of your program, could you give some insight as to that, or maybe some advice for people based on your experience there?
When we started our program, we did not have that institutional knowledge of guys who'd grown up in the program who are now in middle management and now command staff positions, that kind of stuff. You build advocates through that quite a bit too. And I think that for me as a generally pretty young officer back in 05, starting this program. I was very fortunate to have, a captain and an undersheriff at the time who I could have direct access to get decisions made and to get approvals and to also just keep them in the loop. And so without that, I don't think it would have been successful. As our agency has matured from the aviation side, now people will have moved in, have graduated from, working in air unit to being, supervisors to commanders and command staff, and myself as a chief of police. That has eased up a little bit. You're speaking some of the same language, and you understand when they come and ask for resources. You go, I know exactly that makes sense. Yeah, let's try and do that. And so I was fortunate that, despite not having that, institutional knowledge and people have grown up in the program, that I did have a very receptive command staff that was willing to listen to a young program and be open to just that communication that's needed.
That's great. I love it. These conversations are awesome because so many people are in that situation, and so I appreciate your insight and sharing some of that stuff. If you're the last question I'll ask in this rabbit hole, and sorry to kind of take over on this part, but I think it's timely. If you were to look backwards and say, I wish I would have done this one thing different, I think it would have changed the outcome in a more positive way. Is there something that kind of fits that bill?
I think that when we started the program and we were, our first aircraft was an OH-58, right? And so we're limited back then in some of the capabilities we had. And I think just being very clear as to what the capabilities are. I think when you see agencies start aviation programs, sometimes it's like, hey, we're going to do a search and rescue. We're going to do all these types of things. And do you really have the platform for it? Do you really have the expertise and the equipment and that kind of stuff? And then you find out you're kind of limited to, a certain component of airborne law enforcement, that kind of stuff. And so I think just being very clear as to this is what we're going to be able to do, and start small, and be very clear, and then you can kind of grow from there if the opportunities come along. But I think everyone just thinks, hey, we're getting a helicopter, so we're going to be able to do all this, and that's not always going to be the case, depending on what platform and equipment you have.
Very important. I'm thinking of recent history here where there's a unit that's promising the world, and I know what aircraft they have, and some of it is not appropriate to promise that. It's it's important that the crew members understand what they can and can't do, but it's also important for the citizens and for command and for the bean counters and everybody to understand what you can and cannot do with that particular airframe. There are limitations, and non-helicopter people, they don't understand those. I mean, why would they? I mean, it's not their fault. It's just, it gets back to what you were talking about before, David, and educating people and talking to people and showing them what you do and what you can do. But it's just as important to tell them what you can't do.
Yeah.
Right.
Because when it comes up, for instance, you say, hey, there's a search and rescue mission where you have to go pick up these 3 people, and you're running an R-44 or you're running an OH-58. Maybe that's going to be possible. Maybe not. Maybe it'll take multiple trips. But it's not what they're picturing, though. They think, oh, just take that helicopter, go up to that mountain at 10,000 feet, pick those people up and come on back. That's what they think. They don't know anything else. And so if you paint that picture for them ahead of time, that's a good thing. So when those things do come up, you can say, hey, you knew if we're going to do that, this is what we need. We need this airframe. Oh, we did. Yeah, that's right. And maybe you get that airframe, which we're going to get to with your unit. I mean, obviously things changed and evolved. But that's a really important topic. No doubt about it.
I think we've seen those units that have fallen into the trap a little bit. It goes one of 2 ways. Either they're under delivering what they say, or they're going to be putting themselves in some danger and doing something that they're probably not equipped to do.
And sometimes it's tragedy.
Yes,
it can reach that point. I mean, that's not an exaggeration at all. Where the crew says, well, we said that we could do this, and this, and what do you think, partner? Oh, and they go try it and it doesn't go well. And then now what? And now that unit's gone. A lot of units are, one incident away from being out of business. And they have to think about that before they accept missions and broaden their mission profile when they don't have the airframe to do it. They have to be able to say no. And that's going to come back into play here in the next hour because of how your unit evolved. And it evolved slowly, but steadily. And when people hear where you guys are at today, they're going to go, wow, how did they do that? And we're going to talk about it. You've already talked about some of it. We're going to talk about it even more, how you did that. It's a great success story. But it all started for you as a young man. So now we're going to get Dave's story that leads us up to him becoming a cop and then a deputy and then involved in the air support program. So take us through that, Dave. Where'd you grow up at, and take us into what you were doing as a kid, activity wise.
Yeah, when I was little, we kind of moved around a little bit. I was actually born in Anchorage, Alaska. Lived there for a short time, and then also had some time in Portland and also in Tri-Cities in Washington State. But moved to Spokane when I was probably 12, 13, somewhere around there, and have been here for the most part since then. Growing up, was huge into playing soccer and coaching soccer and reffing soccer and that kind of stuff. I wrestled, had probably a pretty ordinary childhood, beyond that. And then, when I was around probably 18, 19, probably kind of got the bug for going into law enforcement. I had a couple of friends whose fathers were in law enforcement and they were planning on going to law enforcement. And so, it was something that kind of started to intrigue me probably, shortly after high school and everything, and started working towards that. And back in, actually started my law enforcement career in 1998 in a kind of a smaller agency in Idaho, Post Falls Police Department. And it was a great agency. It still is a great agency. They've grown significantly. I think when I worked there, it probably had 30, 40 officers, and it's grown quite a bit since then. But it was a great environment for me. The agency really treated me well. I worked on the SWAT team there. I was a field training officer. I was a patrol officer. So I had some opportunities to do some different things there. They were very supportive. Really, really enjoyed it. But after about 3 years, I had some more opportunities come up in Spokane County, which is basically just right next door. Spokane County is a much larger agency and more opportunities, and especially at that age, it's something that was important and wanted to do. And in 2001, came over and started at the Spokane County Sheriff's Office.
And before we get into detail on Spokane, let me back you up a little bit and ask you a couple things.
Yeah.
What you talked about, you had friends whose family members were cops. Was there anything else that sparked your interest in law enforcement? Was it media, television, any other things? Some of the answers we get are fascinating on this.
I don't think it was. I was actually working in Spokane for the city of Spokane. Actually at a place called Riverfront Park, and some of my friends worked there, and they were working security there. Their dads were police officers for the Spokane Police Department, and they were, that's what they wanted to do. And kind of being around them and kind of learning about it, I kind of got the bug a little bit. It was something that really interested me, and kind of started gearing myself up for it. And it was nothing that was really in the family growing up. But it's ironic though, that with that being said, both my brother and my sister are both officers as well too. So
wow, there's some in the water.
Something happened. Yeah, they've got all three of us there. So my little brother is a lieutenant for the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office, which is agency county next door in Idaho, and so yeah, something got us there.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Well, and he had no interest in it either. He graduated from college, and he actually came and did a ride along with me, and had no interest in doing it. And we ended up getting in a pursuit and foot pursuit and all the things and
The
everything.
hook was
and,
set.
Yeah, he came back and he goes, I think I want to do this. I'm like, all right.
Yeah. Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Once you get to experience that.
Yeah.
Where in the timeline here? Soccer's been a big part of your life. I mean, I know that because I know you, and you know that we're both soccer people. But at one point, you mentioned I played soccer. I was a coach, a referee. Well, you're still coaching to this day, and we're going to touch on that in a minute. But you were also a professional soccer referee at one point. Where did that fall into your life timeline here?
Yeah, so I actually started referee. I played my whole life and started reffing pretty early as a kid to just to make money and that kind of stuff. I think I started first reffing when I was probably 12 or 13 years old.
Cool.
And really enjoyed it. And it's a great activity for a kid. You stay active. You're learning the game. You learn it
from a whole different angle.
Yep. And it's flexible hours. You pick the games that you want to do. So if it works for your schedule, great. And I started with youth games and then worked my way up to doing some high school games, and then started doing some college games, and then started doing some pro games. And it was very cool. It was a great opportunity. I did up until I was about 22, and at the age of 18, 19, you're traveling to California and all over the country to ref these games, getting flown in to referee college games and pro games. And for an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid, like that's the life.
That is amazing. You were a young referee.
Yeah.
I'm sure you heard that plenty of times on the pitch.
Many times, yes.
There's this kid calling that crap.
Yeah. Usually from about the 300 section. Yeah.
That's right. And we gotta get this in before we move on to your law enforcement. And this is recent. Tell us about. You've had a lot of successes as a coach too, but tell us about the most recent success as a coach. This is a big deal. I know you're humble about it, but I want people to know that, in the middle of doing all these jobs and being a law enforcement officer, and he still was involved with soccer and coaching with his kids. And what's the most recent thing we're talking about here, Dave?
I've been pretty fortunate to coach for probably 25 years, and coaching both on the club and the high school side, and the high school team I coach, they just won state. They went 21-0 at a perfect season, and just kind of everything kind of clicked together this year for them, and a really good group of girls. This is a girls varsity team, and great kids, and it was a fun ride for them to kind of have that perfect season. And a lot of them were seniors, so get to go out. That is
exciting.
Go out on top for them.
Your impact on that is huge, and I know it is. And those girls are going to, their lives are changed that day that they won that championship. There's no doubt that for the better. They're going to look back on that and learn life lessons that are going to take them into the future, and a lot of that's because of you. Good for you. And I know John can relate to this because he's in the middle of multiple sports with his two boys, and you can imagine the thrill of going 21-0. I mean,
oh man,
I've never been on a team like that, and that's exciting. And then state championship, fantastic! Appreciate Congratulations.
That. Yeah, fun team.
I do have to ask one question because Jack mentioned my boys they're both playing soccer. Between soccer, baseball, and football, I've seen a lot of weird interactions with refs. So I have to ask for you, in your reffing experience, is there one incident that comes to mind, whether it was a red card you gave on a blatant foul? What's one thing that kind of sticks in your mind as kind of a wild incident that you're a part of as a ref?
Thanks to our sponsor, Summit Aviation, a full-service provider for business, government, parapublic, and military aviation, specializing in maintenance, modifications, avionics, interiors, and paint. Discover more at summit-aviation.com.
I think I had a pretty good relationship with the fans and the coaches and that kind of stuff. I think probably one of the weirdest things for me was just back then was, doing some televised games and going back and critiquing yourself and watching like, I might not have got that one right. There was no VAR back then. And
thank God.
And have your, VHS machine recording the game and go back and critiquing yourself. It was kind of a surreal thing for, an 18, 19-year-old kid to do.
Yeah. That's cool that you went back and did that, though. I mean, you were ahead of your time there. I heard a recording not long ago where an NHL ref was mic'd up, and he made a terrible call, and they were telling him how bad it was. And NHL refs typically between periods go and watch.
Wow.
And he came back, and you can't change it. You can't change the call. It's done. But he's mic'd up, and he apologized to the guy. I said, I blew it. I watched it between periods, and I'm sorry. I'm human. I blew that. And the player was like stunned that he admitted it and respected it. And I thought that was cool. So
good for
you
him.
were ahead of your time, Dave. Looking at film as a referee, looking at film, you're way ahead of your time. Fantastic. Yeah. So let's go back to career here. We're back to, you made about 3 years at Post Falls.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
3 years.
Spokane County comes into your view for obvious reasons. It's a bigger agency, lots more opportunity. Little did you know that it was going to end up an aviation opportunity, but it did. So walk us through, tell us about Spokane County, first of all, size, population, terrain, and all that. And then about the Sheriff's Department, personnel. Give us an overview of Spokane County.
Yeah, Spokane County is a huge county. It borders right at the Washington-Idaho border line. It's we've got about a little under 300 commissioned officers that we use. It is a full service agency. It's got K9, SWAT, bomb squad, crowd control team, dive team, marine patrol, now aviation, drones. It's an agency that has a lot of opportunities, and it's also to me it's a great place to work because it has kind of the best of both worlds as far as it has very urban environments and it has very rural environments, and so that's a great opportunity for our officers to be able to work different areas, and if they get kind of burned out, they can work a different area. If they need a change of pace, they can do that. We have that. It's kind of like being able to work for two different agencies in one. And with that, we have the largest contract city in the state of Washington, being the city of Spokane Valley. And, it's a very urban area and that kind of stuff. So you can kind of have those different experiences that, as opposed to maybe going to one agency and you're just going to work in that same environment. If you want to go out and work out in rural areas and that kind of stuff, you have those opportunities. But if you want to go work gang and you want to work drug and those kind of stuff, you have those opportunities as well. And it's been a good agency for me. I wouldn't change it for anything.
There's some demanding terrain in that county as well. Can you talk about that? Because that's to our aviation listeners, which is a majority of them. They think about that stuff. For instance, elevations. What's your top elevation there? And there's some really mountainous, rugged country within Spokane County.
Yeah, there definitely is. You've got some multiple ski resorts. You've got Mount Spokane right here that keeps us very busy with search and rescue, missing snowmobilers, that kind of stuff. We get all the climate, so we get we can get a lot of snow in the wintertime. We can get very hot in the summertime. Lots of bodies of water, lots of very large lakes and rivers and that kind of stuff as well. And then you've got just your in the valley area as well. And so, you get a lot of different terrains, which means a lot of different mission profiles. As far as search and rescue to patrol to, water stuff. And so that kind of keeps you going. And then that brings in weather concerns as well too. This flying in the Pacific Northwest, you're going to be dealing with snow, you're going to be dealing with fog, significant amounts of time, rain. And so it's one of those things that we're constantly evaluating, our SMS procedures and, what are we doing to make sure that we are adjusting to, those environmental considerations that you mentioned.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It certainly is a beautiful part of Washington and goes into Idaho and Montana. All very close together right there. From the eastern part of Spokane County, you go into Idaho, and next thing you know, you're in Montana. It's in that upper northern Idaho. Kind of is not very wide, so you could be in 3 states within a flight if you had to be. We'll definitely touch on that in a little bit with the aviation unit, but it's a search and rescue paradise, not in a bad way. Because there's so much outdoor activity, that that certainly affects what you need equipment wise and airframe wise and training wise as we move into aviation. That's just the way it is there.
You can be a national force, in 30 minutes, and it'll run you all the way up to Canada. So I mean, you got some really remote, and rugged terrain, and and then when you talk about the environmental stuff, seems like now we've even added in, fires so much more, and I don't remember fires hardly ever growing up here, and now it's just fire season, and you just can't expect that, for 2-3 months, like it's just, you're going to be dealing with fires and the smoke and that kind of stuff as well, which again impacts, our flight crews, how they're operating and that kind of stuff, especially at night.
Wow. Leading up to when you started, we're going to talk about the beginning, of the aviation unit, but once you got to Spokane County, what positions were you working? What was what led up to the aviation time?
Yeah, so when I started, I came over as a patrol officer, and did some time there. Really enjoyed I loved my patrol time. Went on, became the agency training coordinator, promoted into become an investigator and a detective. I worked in the sexual assault unit. I worked in our property crimes task forces, in plainclothes capacities. Then promoted into the sergeant role, and I was a patrol sergeant for years, and then moved into supervising our traffic unit. Eventually, I was promoted into becoming a captain, overseeing our intelligence unit, which included our Joint Terrorism Task Force guys from the FBI, our crime analysts, our detectives that work in that area. Became the patrol captain shortly after that. And then I think in 2017, I was promoted and appointed to the role of undersheriff for Spokane County. And I still serve that position now, but we're kind of unique in that we also have a large contract city, being the city of Spokane Valley, and that's got about 120,000 people just in that city alone. And they contract for law enforcement services, which is what the Spokane Valley Police Department is under the Spokane County Sheriff's Office. I serve as the chief of police for the Spokane Valley Police Department as well, and was appointed to that in 2020. So just about 5 years now, and still serving that role now as the chief of police.
And you've got all your hair still.
Yeah. I remember when you got the position and going, hold it, what? I didn't understand the system. When you said, I knew you were the undersheriff, then you go, hey, I got the chief job, and I'm like, whoa, you're a chief and an undersheriff. So thanks for explaining that, because that is unique. I had never heard of that before. It makes sense once you lay it out and figure out, how it's working. It makes perfect sense. But on the surface, you say, oh yeah, he's an undersheriff, but he's also the chief of police in a city within the county. So it is kind of unique, but it works, doesn't it?
It is. It definitely does work. And for the Spokane Valley Police Department, the city of Spokane Valley, there's a lot of economies of scale, by doing that. And, probably a city of 115,000 people probably by itself wouldn't have access to air support, right? Probably wouldn't be at a size to have a helicopter program. And
certainly not.
By partnering with Spokane County Sheriff's Office, you kind of get the full suite, and it makes both agencies stronger. We're able to have those shared SWAT teams and bomb squads and that kind of stuff that, by scaling it up, we're able to accomplish that, and it provides a better service to the community. As a result, we do have air support when we have a missing 4-year-old. We do have a full all hazard SWAT team and bomb squad and that kind of stuff.
Kind of reminds me of the partnership that Lee Majors has developed with Leon County and Tallahassee. Combining resources and creating those opportunities to provide services to cities that couldn't otherwise have that option, I think is great. I love that you guys have done that. It's really cool.
Yeah, and we'll probably talk about it later, but we even expand that even further on the aviation side. So we've got a lot of kind of a combined metro air support team from 5-6 different agencies that are partnered to it.
So back in 2005, we're going to step backwards to when the aviation unit was started. You were still a deputy or a sergeant at that point?
I was a deputy. Yeah. Deputy at the time.
So we talked about, the aviation unit's beginnings a little bit, but it had to start somewhere. What did it start with? What started it? Who started it to get the idea rolling, to get the process going? What was it? You? Was it a group of people? And I mean, that's a monumental task. It's a monumental task. What was your role in that?
The initial vision was through Sheriff Sturk at the time. He was the sheriff, Mark Sturk, and saw that, exactly what we've talked about, the variabilities in terrain and all the missions that come out of it, and really we're kind of an island. We do not have any other air support. I can't call a neighboring city for air support. It doesn't exist. My next closest city that has air support is King County in Seattle, Washington, 4 hours away. So, there was definitely a real void in that availability. So he wanted to start back up a helicopter program. And we received some, I think about $700,000 in congressional appropriations from our local congresswoman, who helped us kind of get that seed money to get things started. We acquired the OH-58 and sent it off to have it completely refurbed and done right, all the mission equipment installed and everything. And knowing that, we really didn't have any aviation experience, back then, they reached out to John Preston and said, "Hey, will you kind of help walk us through this process and guide us through it and get our feet underneath us?" And he did, and he did a great job. He came in and was under contract for our first year, where he developed pilot selection processes and TFO selection process, and this is the equipment we should have, and this is the insurance we should have, and all those kind of things, and then started the initial training, and to be able to bring in guys like Warner and stuff like that, Warner Crumples, and like, okay, this is how you do pursuit, this is how you do high altitude surveillance, and that kind of stuff. You think about how much we charge, or how much we get charged if we bring in an expert for a week. It's incredible. But to be able to bring these guys in for a couple of years and provide that was just invaluable. And it's the only way we were able to accomplish what we did. And so John Preston, kind of set the parameters for. I was selected as a TFO, and kind of started just getting I'd never been in a helicopter, and didn't know the front from the back of one when we first started, and but received some really good training. And as the program grew, John was on a contract, and his contract expired, and at that point we took the supervision in-house, and I had become a supervisor at that point. And I'm very fortunate that John did stop helping though there, and he, for years and years, because we were still very, very green. We've been around 20 years. I still consider us very, very green. And there's still lots of things we can learn. So
that's a great attitude, by the way. It's a great attitude in law enforcement aviation. You can be in existence for 50 years, 60 years, and still have that attitude. Hey, we still have things to learn here, because you do. It's absolutely true. Nobody in this industry, even the oldest units, the NYPDs, the LAPDs, I get that. They've been around a long time, but they learn new things every day. Something happens where they go, we need to change that. We need to upgrade that. We need to never do that again. I mean, things still happen. A great attitude. I love that you said that, Dave. You guys have been around, and I can say personally, I know a very professional, very good unit, but you still have that attitude. I love that. That's going to benefit you in many ways, especially safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's our number one concern. And we have to be, I think we have to be hyper vigilant on it, because I can't go, like we mentioned, I can't go next door and talk to another air unit and be like, hey, how do you guys deal with this? Right. Yeah. There are no other units around here. And so that's where, I think APSA, is a huge piece of that. I think your show is a huge piece of that, where, maybe I don't have that unit next door. I can go to the hangar next door and talk to you, but I can listen to the show, and all of a sudden I'm hearing from, legends like you guys and that kind of stuff, or I can talk to APSA, or I can go to APSCon and network with everybody and learn from there, because, like I said, I do think that we're still learning, still green.
Very, very good attitude and good points. I know John, this is a high priority for John and I, but John talks about it all the time, the networking and how valuable that is, to learn more, and how when you're sitting in a class, even at AppsCon, that you'll walk away from that week learning more from the people that you're sitting with than some of the instructors sometimes, if you take the time to talk to them and listen to them and pick their brains, because there'll be 20 different units maybe in that class, 20 different ways of doing things. Most of them are similar, but there are little things. And you pick these things up and you go, why did I never think of that? These guys are geniuses, And then you find out they've only been in existence for a couple of years, and they figured it out. And the 50, 60-year departments or aviation units hadn't thought of it. That happens all the time in aviation in general, but certainly law enforcement aviation. I mean, it's great attitude to have that open mind and expand your unit on things like that. I love that.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, sole 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking.
We take training, that networking and the training super seriously, and you've seen it, Jack, where we try to bring in once a year or twice a year or something like that, someone from the outside to bring stuff in. And so, on the pilot side, we brought in Randy Rolls, and we brought in ARS and the SR3s. We bring them in, probably about once a year, and then, bringing in instructors on the tactics side, like yourself and Kevin Means, we've had up here numerous times, and that kind of stuff. And then, we've been very fortunate in our partnership with the Airborne Public Safety Association to host a lot of APSA events up here. We've done a lot of the safety stand-tos where we're bringing in, some great instructors and great people to talk about that safety piece, to make sure that we're not getting, isolated and insulated from best practices and everything. And it's been very, very helpful. And we've been fortunate that, we've been able to, those are all expenses, and to be able to have the opportunity to bring in some of those and share with our neighbors and that kind of stuff has been really helpful, and then making us, trying to be safe.
Yeah. I love what APS has done with the safety stand-tos. I think as we continue down the path we're on as far as recruitment and retention goes, we're going to continue to have problems setting a week aside for air crews to travel to a certain location and attend and do the networking and get the training that we're talking about. So to be able to send a crew or your staff for one day to a safety stand-to somewhere in your local area, I think is great. Yeah. So I love that they're filling the void there. And then it expands further, I guess, to Nick Minks and what he's doing with the online stuff. You can literally get a lot of that education at the hangar on a bad weather day or something. So I love that we're looking for ways innovatively to come up with solutions to some of the training issues that we've had in the past. That's great.
I think, the last 3-4 years we've hosted one of APSA's safety stand-tos, and had some great attendance. We had the one we had just a few months ago. I think we had 75, 80 people attend it. And just a real diverse group of airborne law enforcement. We had RCMP, and we had FBI, and we had DEA, and we had, King County and Snohomish County and Border Patrol and all those kind of stuff. So, it was great it's a smaller version of AppsCon, right? As far as bringing all those connections together and everything. And so really, really helpful. And, and APSA, has started their webinar series, where they're, 1 hour classes, that kind of stuff on various things, SMS, starting a DFR programs, hoist operations, all those kind of things where, it's free for APSA members, and you can jump in, and, it's not something that's all, a week-long consuming event, and you can watch it for an hour, and you can share it with your staff. We try and do it kind of coordinate it around our training days, and we'll have, everybody in. Well, hey, they've got a webinar on this, and let's watch this. And good little refreshers, and easy to digest.
I love that. Yeah, that's great.
What was your air unit from day one thought of as a regional unit, or was that something that evolved?
It evolved. I think the vision when it started was for it to eventually become there, but when it first started, for really probably about the first, I'd say, probably 7-8 years, it was Spokane County going it alone, and that probably worked. Allowed us to focus on ourselves first, being successful, and showing the region, hey, there's some serious value to air support. And this is what they can do, and they're a professional operation, a good safety record, all those kind of things. And so, as time went on, it was very organic, and other agencies started reaching out, and we were receptive to us saying, hey, what does it look like to partner with you, and that kind of stuff. We've always provided as a regional service. We go into central Montana, we go to the Cascades, from the Canadian border down into Oregon. So we're covering a 3-state region, that kind of stuff. But to have those other agencies now partner with us and provide staffing and resources really allowed us to take it to the next step up. And so now we have not only the Spokane Valley Police Department, Spokane County Sheriff's Office, but we also have the Spokane Police Department. We have the Liberty Lake Police Department, and they all provide TFOs and resources to the program. And then we also have some of the fire departments as well. So we have Spokane Valley Fire Department, we have the Spokane County Fire District 4, and they provide what's called our HRMs, our helicopter rescue medics. They've got the experience and the knowledge that we don't when it comes to the rescue stuff, as far as packaging victims up and providing them medication and all the stuff that goes into those rescues, rather than us having to try and reinvent the wheel and train people up that it's not necessarily in their wheelhouse. They're doing this day in, day out, and they provide our HRMs to go up and down the line, when we're doing hoist rescues and that kind of stuff. And so it is not uncommon when we're flying that you could have 3 different agencies represented on board. You could have a pilot from Spokane Valley Fire Department and a crew chief from Spokane County, and a HRM from one of the fire districts on board. So it's truly a public safety partnership that kind of hits all the different disciplines and comes together, make sure that we're kind of maximizing each other's strengths when we do it, and each other's resources. None of these agencies alone would be able to do this by themselves. And so for us to be able to partner together, it is great. And it's been really fun to see how honestly seamless it is to integrate, not just different law enforcement agencies, but public safety partners into it. And it's just been a great partnership, and it's a testament to probably those guys that work together, as well as the leadership from those different agencies that are committed to making sure that this happens. Chief Frank Soto from Spokane Valley Fire Department has been a great partner, and he provides I believe 6 of our helicopter rescue medics, and been all the fire partners have just really been instrumental in us being able to do where we're at today.
Sounds like those partnerships really allowed you the growth as well, which we're going to touch on here in a second with airframes. But without those partnerships, maybe the unit isn't where it is today. Is that accurate?
I think that's 100% accurate. Yeah, I think you look at kind of different pots here, right? The expertise part of it, we didn't have for, to do medical stuff, and that kind of stuff. And so they provide that. Their guys are well trained in that. And then the resource pot, they equip their own guys, they pay for their own guys, and that kind of stuff. And so, it'd be a hard challenge to go out and hire, 6 to 8 helicopter rescue medics and train them and equip them and everything. Yeah. So we definitely wouldn't be where we're at today without those partnerships. And, when we talk about, educating, our local elected officials, it's the same thing there too, right? You're constantly saying, hey, you know what, your staff did this, what a great rescue they had, and it's completely true. And they deserve a lot of credit for partnering a little bit different than a lot of your units do.
Yeah. Something well, there's a lot of things that are cool about that, but I'll highlight just a few. One is the cost efficiencies that go with what you're describing. I think you shoulder that burden as one agency. It's tough for the training and all the personnel that goes with that kind of program. So you come up with a way to share the costs among multiple agencies. And then you also have the personnel efficiencies. I talked about recruitment and retainment issues. As we keep going, an agency is going to have a hard time dedicating 8 folks to the rescue side of these missions, where now you've shared that I don't call it burden, but shared the responsibility of staffing those positions amongst different agencies. How genius is that? And the last part of that, which I really like, is when it comes to a position you might find yourself in someday because of budgetary issues, where somebody might say, hey, we should consider cutting this program. Now you've got all the leaders of all these different programs from these different agencies saying, nope, you can't because of this thing. There's so much political will that you've generated within these different programs that I think they'd be knocking the door down and saying, no, you can't cut these programs. I think that's great for so many reasons.
It's a good point.
Yeah, very good point. It's a lot easier for budgetarily for a program to get cut if it's just one entity, and to just say, well, we're not going to do it. And now when you do share those resources and you do have a partnership and it affects other people, it's a lot more challenging to do something like that. And there's going to be a lot more thought that goes into it. And I think one other benefit of kind of the regional model too is it opens up to more federal funding. And from an administrative level, I recognize that when you apply for federal grants and other stuff like that, your application package is much more stronger if you can say that this is a regional program and that you're applying it regionally. When we apply for Homeland Security funds and when we apply for congressional appropriations and that kind of stuff, it's not just myself or the sheriff saying, let's do this. You have a network of all the chiefs and all the sheriffs saying, hey, this is important. We need this. And that voice gets heard more then.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. This sounds like there's so many pluses to this setup that you have, and to this model is a better word. It's a good model. And you're helping a lot of people in a lot of areas at the same time. I mean, not only is the model good to continue working and expanding and flying, but you're helping so many more people than if you were just in the county or just in a city. You're going beyond that. It's a truly regional team. That's very interesting. Very smart. Very smart. Walk us through the evolution of airframes, Dave. I know we started with, you started with one OH-58 that got refurbed but it has changed since 2006 to 2025. Walk us through the change in airframes and the expansion of the unit.
Yeah. So, we, like we talked about in 2006, we started with that first OH-58 and we still have that 58 still in existence today. But since then, years after that, we started adding more 58s and just because of the need to at times have 2 aircraft up or when we're dealing with maintenance and that kind of stuff. So we expanded into additional 58s and getting them fully equipped with all the flares and searchlights and that kind of stuff. But as we mentioned, you're going to be limited in your capabilities in that. And so we had the opportunity to add a couple Bell 205 A++ Super Hueys into the fleet. And we did, and they're just beautiful aircraft. Completely, and these aren't, military aircraft. These actually came from Department of State, and just beautiful aircraft, all glass cockpit, identical. They just put about $3.3 million into each one of them. They were completely redone, new paint, the whole thing. And we lucked out when they came out of the refurb shop. They had 5 hours on them. So they're essentially like brand new for us. And we were lucky to find and to get those. And when we did, we went through and entered into the search and rescue arena and some of the bigger aircraft type stuff. We added the Collins hoist to them and started being able to do team transports. Our SWAT team is a regional team that covers the pretty much the same area that the helicopter unit does. And so it's not uncommon for them to be a state away, 2 states away, or, 3 hours away. And so for us to be able to have a way to fly an immediate action team up there, get 6-7 guys up there while the Bearcats and the MRAPs and that kind of stuff are driving up there is huge. To be able to transport our bomb squad, another regional team, get them somewhere quick. So we do team transports in that. We do aerial use of force. Obviously, search and rescue is a huge one for us. That's really the bread and butter for those aircraft for us. But also fire suppression. We have a Bambi bucket. With the fire season, it's just becoming an annual thing now in this region. That's an additional capability that allows us to hopefully get a little water on something before it gets out of control. We're not into long-term fire suppression, but that initial attack is something that we think there's opportunity to help there. The Super Huey has been a great addition for us. And then the latest addition is last year we signed on a contract for a brand new Bell 505. And we should be taking delivery of that in April. So just a few months from now, everyone's getting excited for her and ready to go for her. So we'll continue to have the 58s in our fleet, but we'll have the 505 and as we transition to that platform, in the future as well. I think it's going to be a good platform for us because it's, we've got the heavy aircraft that, we can use for the larger stuff, for hoisting and everything. The 505 will really be our, replace 58 for just being eyes in the air, It'll be the patrol aircraft and
great patrol ship.
Yeah, a little more capable than the 58 and, operationally, probably a little more economically feasible as well too.
I love the 505 and the kind of the role it's taking in our industry. Like you talked about defining your role in your mission earlier, and I think agencies that are a patrol-based program, looking at that aircraft is something that definitely that's an aircraft that fits the bill. Can you talk about your guys' decision to go with the 505 and some of the things you liked most about that platform?
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, Sol 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking.
Thank you to our sponsor, Canyon Aero Connect. Canyon Aero Connect has been a trusted leader in airborne law enforcement communication since Paul Wolfsburg introduced the first flight phone in 1970. While our name has evolved, our commitment to innovation and quality remains strong. Contact us today at canyonaeroconnect.com to explore our latest mission-critical solutions.
Thanks to our sponsor, Summit Aviation, a full-service provider for business, government, parapublic, and military aviation, specializing in maintenance, modifications, avionics, interiors, and paint. Discover more at summit-aviation.com.
Thank you for joining us today for another great conversation on the Hangar Z podcast. We were fortunate to have Dave Ellis from the Spokane County Sheriff's Department join us. Dave's experience in helping to get the department's air unit up and running is so important for others to hear. He played a huge role in that unit's history and is always willing to share that journey with others. We were thrilled to have him join us today. Thank you again to all our followers and the sponsors that make this happen. The support we receive from MHM Publishing has been amazing. Don't forget to check out all the other Vertical Helicast podcasts, including the Real Rescue podcast, the Helicopter podcast, the Vertical MRO podcast, and the newest member of the family, the Valor Flight Crew podcast, covering the personnel and life-saving equipment behind helicopter air ambulance services. For more information, go to verticalhelicast.com. Catch you the next time on the Hangar Z podcast.